So the end of the Parshas Chesara, you can take a look at it later. The last pasuk in Parshas Chesara talks about Yishmael, and then it says about the last words of Apnei Kol Echad Nofel. And Rashi explains what that means. But the Baal HaTurim, he says that the next words after this pasuk is the next parsha, Eila Teolis Yitzchak. What does it mean? It means that at the end of days, before Mashiach comes, first we'll see the downfall of Bnei Yishmael, the descendants of Yishmael, which are the Arabs, and then we'll see Eila Telis Yitzchak, the coming of Mashiach, who is the descendant of Yitzchak. So here we are, and therefore it has to be this week, please. Okay. So yesterday we covered, we're on page 125. And we use the explanation, the example of a mashal that very sages and brilliant people have to explain something. They need a mashal. On the other hand, an ordinary person, not only one mashal, but sometimes 300 mashalim, sometimes 3,000 mashalim. The mashalim are always in proportion to their greatness. So therefore, we understand that if someone who's not a Chacham Gadol, and he's saying something which is wisdom, but ordinary wisdom, that person doesn't need Mashalim. And in fact, if he gives a Mashal, it's actually going to complicate things, confuse things, make things not clear, just the opposite, because the Mashal is not necessary. So let's continue with this point, and that's on page 124, the line that begins with the words, let's start 125, the last line, Masha Enkin. After explaining what a mashal accomplishes, Masha Enkin b'shar chachamim, by other chachamim that are ktanim be'erkam, that in proportion to these chachamim, that are ordinary wise people, but ordinary wisdom, not nowhere near that level, they didn't give mishalim. Gemara, like it says in the Gemara, page 124, good morning. Thank you very much. Like it says in Gemara, there's no longer people that do Mishalim. Why not? Because these are people, they don't need a mashal, and therefore there's no purpose in a mashal. This is the fish, because their wisdom is so much less than the others. And people could understand it without a mashal and without examples, just the way it is. Just to say what you want to say. So therefore you don't need a mashal. If they're going to give a mashal, you shtusim with it'll be just nonsense and empty words. Why? Because the mashal doesn't add anything, doesn't contribute anything, and you're just confusing people. You don't need it. Thank you. Like I said yesterday, that this will be like a garment. Mashal is a garment for the logic. So just like a garment, if it's longer than this size, then you can't say, well, being that it's more fabric, more material, can only be better. No, it's not true. The person's wearing something longer than what they need, they'll trip over it and they'll actually cause damage. Same thing here. So now this is the mashal. Let's go back to the nimshal, which is the spheres. Based on this, we can understand something similar to Lamaila. We're on page 127. That when the life flow and sustenance comes from Atikla Kadisha Shu Ein Sof, which is infinite, this would be like the Chachamim that are very brilliant, very deep. When they understand things, it's very abstract. And just like their students can't receive it, so too the world can't receive this light because it's infinite. Gam Batzilus, even Atzilus. It can be that they should receive this light and not become become nullified, become lost. And the dafka de levushin, they must have garments, and the garment conceals the light. And what are these garments? Cyrus. This is the hair. The hair, as I said before, is tzimtzum and excessive tzimtzum.
Rabbi Majeski,
Yeah.
can you explain the connection of the mushroom and the Like, what's the garment? What's the excessive?
So a mushal is a garment to a concept, which means if the concept is very deep and abstract, and the only way I can explain this through mushal, what is a mushal? Mushal is something which is similar. It's the same idea. Or just thinking as I was coming here this morning, something the Rebbe once explained when the Rebbe was talking a lot about Mihu Yehudi. Mihu Yehudi, which was in Israel, that the Rebbe wanted them to write in the laws that only people that are from a Jewish mother or went through Gir Kahalacha are Jewish. And they refused to put that in, the word Kahalacha. And as a result of that, they accepted a lot of people that are not necessarily Jewish according to halacha, but they're considered Jews and they're living in the country. And just recently, they found 6 people that were spying on Israel, Israelis that lived in Israel, that worked for Iran, and they were spying on Israel, and they had a plan to assassinate some people in Israel. They were taking pictures of all different locations in Israel. And some of them were people who came in as Jews and are considered Jews, and they're living in Israel. The Rebbe used the words that you're creating a 5th column in the country. So at that time, everybody came out, the media and all those people who are against this is so extreme. You're causing a split in the Jewish people by saying that these people aren't accepted. That was the argument. That the Rebbe is making division. So when they say that we accept everybody, that's unity. When the Rebbe says only api halacha, that's division. So the Rebbe gave a simple mashal. That's a mashal. What was a mashal? The Rebbe said fire and water are both very important elements. And one of the ways of having fire and water working together is you put water in a pot. And you put the pot on the fire. Shana could testify to that. That if you put the water in a pot and you put the pot on the fire, it's going to cook. So fire and water are working together. So somebody would say, wow, if fire and water work together like that, could you imagine how much better it would be if you don't put the water in a pot? You put the water on the fire itself, on each other. That will be unity, will be, wow, that'll be much greater. So we know that that's the kind of thing that'll either the water will no longer be there, or the fire will no longer be there. One of the two would happen. There's no way they can work together without the pot. So you have a pot, which is a wall, which is separating the fire from the water, but it's not really a separate division. The purpose of this pot is actually to allow the two to come together. So it means it's a mushal, it's something very gashmius, and you can tell this to anybody who's not even so smart. Everybody understands how the pot is there for the purpose of bringing the thing together. But then when you have to relate it to something deeper, like Yidna and Goyim, intermarriage, or divorce, or in this case about conversion, or other things in Torah, like why does the Torah say that these two people can marry each other? The Torah is making these restrictions. When you understand this concept, a lot of things are understood. Those things are already deeper. So the mushal is a lavush. It's like a glove. It fits my hand. It's like I said yesterday, the one part of the glove is the same shape as my thumb, another part like my pinky, another part like the other fingers. But this is a piece of cloth and this is a hand. So the mashal has details to it that fit the nimshal. That's why it's called a garment, because through the mashal, the depth of the nimshal is hidden. I remember once when I gave the class, somebody said that some sort of English writer who wrote that good fences make good neighbors. Same idea. You're making a fence. Why are you making a fence for? We're neighbors, we're friends. No, the fence, and everyone, and we have a border, and we know that you belong here and I belong here, and there'll be more peace that way. And you can apply it to many, many things. Even to when you talk about spheres, there's this concept in spheres also, where there's something dividing between two things, but the purpose is to bring it together, and so on. So, so again, the relationship between the mashal and what we're talking about is the mashal is like the Ein Sof, the nimshal rather of the wise person is like infinite. It's too much, too deep for the student, so you have to put it into a mashal. That's like the light, which is Ein Sof, that has to go through and be processed through Cyrus. Is that clear? Yeah? No. I raised it. I don't think it's clear.
So it's being hidden in the hair, or the depth of the Atika Kadisha is being just
right. The light of Atika Kadisha is infinite. And that light is supposed to give sustenance to Atzilus, Bria, Yitzir, Asir, which is relatively finite. Those worlds can't receive that light. So therefore, that light has to go through a Tzimtzum, which is Cyrus. So now the Cyrus, we said yesterday, is an excessive Tzimtzum. But being that it's excessive Tzimtzum of something which is infinite, even that little bit that comes through is plenty of light to give life to all the worlds. That's like the Chacham who says, who gives a mashal. The mashal is saying something simple, but in the mashal lies all the depth. Or that would be like the Chacham who gives the joke, that even though it's only a joke, nevertheless, it's the being that he's so wise that even the joke is an expression of deep, deep godly wisdom. Like the mashal of the luchas that I said, that you have a stone that is sapphire stone and it's worth millions and millions of dollars, this huge stone, and therefore even the dust of the stone is also worth millions of dollars. Yes.
Could you please repeat the mashal that you said about Judaism is so many rules and like this?
I'm saying that in Judaism, when there are separations between Kohen and a Levi, or separation between men and women, or separation between Jews and non-Jews, in the Torah, there's no division. Torah is unity. So all these partitions, the purpose is actually to bring together. When the Torah sets up certain laws of tznius, the purpose is, in order for men and women to interact in a healthy way, we need to have certain laws of tznius. So that means the partitions that are there is actually, they should be together, but in a productive way, not in a good way, not in a destructive way.
But what was the mashal that you used?
I've used the mashal of fire and water, that you need a pot that separates the fire from the water to enable fire and water to function together. If you don't have a pot, they can't interact. One will destroy the other. Okay, everybody's clear? We can move on. Okay, next up, V'ayin b'sidr. This is just a reference of Pirish Akel of Rachman Amhulu V'famim Meshuba Chulu Kaneda Shava Yenkim Mazel the Keser and so on. So this is just to bring out the point that Chochmah Batzilus gets its sustenance from Atika Kadisha, which is Ein Sof, it's infinite, and that's why it needs the Cyrus. But the light of Hashem that's in the sphere of Malchus, which is called Nukva, and that's Malchus of Atzilus, so the light there is already contracted, is already concealed, it's already diminished compared to the higher levels. Azai, so that as a result of that, whatever is excess of this level We can't compare it to the excess of Atika Kadisha. This is something which is really hidden more than it should. And if there's such a strong contraction and concealment, this will allow Klippa to get sustenance from Kedusha. Remember, Klippa cannot exist on its own. Klippa can only get chayis, can only nurture from Kedusha. But as long as the light of Kedusha is exposed, then Klippa is blinded. They can't take it. So the only way Klippa can get that light is if the light is diminished, is hidden, is concealed. And then they can get it. So therefore, there's an ordinary light that's hidden, and that's, Hashem wants that there should be Klippa, because he wants a world with free choice. But if there's going to be excessive tzimtzum, that's going to give room that they could get much more sustenance than they're supposed to. So like I said yesterday, much of unfortunately what's going on in Israel today, that on one hand, we want to give food to humans and civilians in Gaza, but when you send down trucks, just yesterday there was a story where they sent down who knows how many trucks of aid, and the Klippas shot people, killed people, and took away all the food for what? So that these Klippas can continue to fight and murder. That's called chayis of Kedusha going to Klippa. Same idea. The same principle applies to everything. If the light is more diminished, then yuchaliyas mepkinas asayis v'aneilu shabai achizas achitzeni b'yesa. So in every level, wherever there's a light that's more of a hidden light, they have to be very careful with the neivus, with the excess. And if it's a light that's a very high light, an infinite light, a very bright light, then even whatever is the overflow is also positive, and you don't have to worry about it, that this will give chayis to Klippa. So this was the reason. Now we go back to explain one of the things he said before. We're on page 126. This is the reason Huzaru Halavim b'midbar lahavir tar akol b'sarim. The Levim were commanded that they should pass a razor over all their flesh. They had to cut all the hair in their body. Why? Because Levim, one of the different Kohanim and Levim, Kohanim is Chesed, Levim is Gevura. Ki darkam v'yilucham b'kodesh, and the Gevura doesn't mean negative. Remember, we said this many times. Gevura is Kedusha Sheba Kedusha, but it's a different path of Kedusha. It's very fiery and very intense. Their approach and their way of serving Hashem is with fiery love towards Hashem. Ukleis HaNefesh, page 129. They can get to the point where their soul would expire because they're so intense with their love for Hashem. That their soul could chas v'shalom leave their body. This was the Aveda of the Nevi'im, the Shir Shal Yoim, singing, that he sang B'Kel Rino Ne'ima. They sang in a pleasant voice and loud. The Kohanim, what they did was quiet. That's what the Zohar says. They just did Aveda. They weren't even talking. They did everything quietly. The Leviim were loud. And that's because, so I think we spoke about this in the beginning of the year, about the difference between love like fire and love like water, right? It's the same idea. The Kohanim is love like water, which means it's a calm love. And not calm because it's lacking in love, but it's calm because it's a deeper kind of love. Like we gave the example, the difference between self-love or loving another person that I meet later in my life. It's not even my relative, an outsider. That love is much more intense and much more fiery. And the love, that self-love, which is really the highest level of love, and that people will give everything up for them because they love themselves, and yet that love is a calm love. So we explained it's not because it's lacking in love, it's because it's a different kind of love. It's I am one with me, so therefore there's no fire, there's no thunder and lightning. But being that it's another person, that's why there's this intense fire. So that was the Levium. And therefore, you needed more caution. Being that their avodah was more with this fire intense, and their neshama sort of coming out of their vessel, which is the body. The keli is what contains the light. And if the light would let go of the keli, it would disappear. So he's saying if it's so intense, this could lead, first of all, on a very practical level. It's brought down Chassidus that sometimes a person could be davening, getting very excited about godliness, not only excited, on fire, a fire burning with love for Hashem. And then they notice somebody doing something wrong, and they can start screaming at him with such anger. How dare you? Why are they like that? Because they're so on fire. But that's called Yenikul Chitzainim. That from their fire of Kedusha, they ended up giving Chayas to Klippa. Because getting angry or embarrassing someone in public, that's all Klippa. So therefore, the Avodah of Levium is where when the singing is usually a person sort of lifting themselves up from their place, lifting myself up to something higher, which means Kohanim, because it was calm, it was a settled love. The Levium, it wasn't calm, it was a love where they're sort of going out of themselves. And when the light goes out of the keli, there's very little light left, and from that little bit of light, the klippas can get chayas. So therefore, Hashem said that the hair has to be cut off, because from that hair, which is the excessive tzimtzum, and there's a little bit of chayas, that will give chayas to klippa. If there wouldn't be any hair, then there could be a little bit of chayas, and it's fine. But if on top of that, there's going to be an excessive tzimtzum, that means that it's going to be a double, triple, fourple tzimtzum, and that's going to be more than the klippas are supposed to get. So remember, this is going to be relevant to the next piece, that klippas are supposed to get chayes. Hashem wants klippa to exist, otherwise they wouldn't be here. And why does he want them to exist? So the world should be balanced, there should be free choice. So Hashem does and did create the world in a way that the light is hidden so they can get chayes. What's wrong with these things are, then we're giving them too much chayes. When you give them too much chayes, that could upset the balance and give more strength to klipa over kedusha. So the term for this in Chassidus is yenikas hachitzeinim, which means nurture to the external forces, nurture to the klipa. We're going to go back to all the terms as soon as we finish this. Okay. This could also explain to Galachas Metsora why the Metsora has to cut off his hair. Said before in the part that we skipped, which is Kabbalah, that why is a Metsora Tameh and he has to be set aside and he has to be outside of the camp, is because in Yoni is Talkos Meichen the Abba Batzufin Leah Barachol Shemchinas Levushim Agdashim. So basically, without going into the details, it generally means that a certain light of Kedusha had left this person, and what happened as a result of that. We see this something which is like not a normal discoloring of the skin. These are the nagoyim. These are the things we see on the skin, or there's hair that's growing. That's all the result of the fact that the light of Kedusha is gone. So this comes in its place. And instead of that light of Kedusha, we see these blotches. That's what a nega is. You see a blotch on the skin, discoloring of the skin. Either it's called sa'es or sapachas or beheras. These are just different names. But what is it? Dinim takifim. This represents severe judgment, which means very hidden light of Hashem. And klipa could get chayes from this person who's the Metsora through the hair that grew on this person's in the spot where there is this leprosy. And therefore, while the person is tummy, that we're not allowed to cut that hair. Why? So here's the interesting point that he said. Let's turn the page. 131. This is considered mitzvah kuf ayin. It's a mitzvah in itself. One of the 248 mitzvahs, 365 negative commandments, is besanesek lo yigalech. You're not allowed to cut off the hair. Just like it's a mitzvah at a later point to cut the hair, you're not allowed to cut the hair that's in that skin where this blotch shows up. And other signs of impurity that appear in the body, you're not allowed to cut it out. Which calls a mitzvah tov kupei gimel. That's mitzvah number 583. He's going by the sefer called Sefer HaMitzvahs, the Chinuch. This is the number. The Seder Teitzei, it's found in the Parshas Kiseitze, Posuk, Hishama Benega Tzaras, which means take heed and be careful with this blemish of Tzaras. Lishmar Ma'od V'lasei, to be very careful not to cut it. V'yirtze Bezeh, Shelo Yakut Simoni Tuma Shemem Yenkim Achitzenu Kenabinyan Asei Lovan. So what is the Torah telling us? You're not allowed to cut the hair. Why not? So he explains. A person shouldn't think he has this blotch on his skin. That means that there's a certain element of klipa there, and the klippas are nurturing physically, spiritually through the physical hair. So he's going to cut it off. So if I cut the hair, I'm not allowing the klipa to get any nurture from me, and they'll be gone. So why does the Torah say not? Sounds like a good plan. Shemam hem yankin. The person is going to think by doing this with force. I'm just cutting off the hair, I'm pushing them away, and they'll be gone. He says, no, that's not a good plan. That's not the way to do it. In fact, chas v'shalom is gabri yosef. If you cut off the hair by force, that'll make the klippas even come back with a vengeance. It's like someone who you want to remove them, and you do it with force, that'll only make them come back with even more force. Why? Because if this sign of impurity grows on the body, the hair grows, that means Hashem wants them to get this sustenance. Hashem doesn't approach any of his creation in a way which is more than they can handle. So just like Hashem gives sustenance to everything in the world, he grants sustenance to all the heavenly hosts, which means to all the angels. They get their sustenance, whatever that is. We get our sustenance. Klippas also get their sustenance. Hashem gives them their vitality, and that will sustain them until Mashiach comes. Once Mashiach comes, they're out of business. As a pasuk, it says, I will remove the spirit of impurity from the world. So Mashiach comes, there won't be any more klipa, and that's why we say there won't be any more Yetzer Hara. But until then, Hashem wants klipa to be around, and therefore he wants them to be around. He has to give them sustenance. So me'achash shuras din Torah, being that according to the Torah law, which is the laws of Metsora, Magiel lem yunikazu, this sustenance which is coming through this hair is coming to them. That's what Hashem designated for them. And apparently there's a reason why Hashem is giving them sustenance from the body of Chaim Yankel. Hashem made him a Metsora, and he should have the hair, and that's where they can get the chayes from. And a different time, he gives it from the body of a different person. Obviously, that's only Hashem knows the reason for that. So this obviously his soul is connected to those spirits which give them chayes. Hashem will not relinquish, will not remove it from them because it's coming to them. And if you will just chop it off or cut it off by force, these klippers will overpower this person, and it'll have more tzaras from them than ever before. In other words, by giving them what they deserve, they'll be calmed down. I know you're thinking, who are these klippers? You have to think of them. They're forces. They have intelligence. Just like there's angels that have intelligence, there are klippas. They also have intelligence. But they were created to generate klippa in the world. So they were created to generate all sorts of negative things. And therefore, if you will, by force, take away what's coming to them, they're going to come back with a vengeance and they're going to fight you more. And the klippa can overpower this person that it'll be brought down by the klippa. So therefore, the Torah says, do not cut the hair. Yeah.
You said that Hashem is going to get rid of the energy of Klippa when Mashiach comes. Does that then mean that we have there's no ways to get rid of the Klippa forces, but just to transfer them until Mashiach comes?
Right. We can't remove them from the world now. That's not meant to be. Now the Avodah is to overcome the challenge of Klippa.
And what will happen to those spots of Klippa? They'll be elevated?
They're out of business. The big sign that say closed, out of business.
Hit this up.
Oh, the Klippa?
Let's say there's sparks of Klippa in this world, then they'll either you get rid of them or you put them in a state of exile till Mashiach comes. But either way, does that mean they're still going to be here?
No, they'll be gone. There'll be Klippa which we transformed through our Avodah. There's a lot of Klippa that was transformed through our Torah, through our mitzvahs, through our tshuva, and we transformed it. So that's already transformed. Whatever will be left of Klippa when the time of Mashiach comes will disappear. There'll be only Kedusha. They can't survive when there's so much Kedusha. They'll be gone. And that means the one person won't have a desire to do something which is against Hashem.
So then what happens
You're wondering if life is going to be boring?
No. I was just saying what's actually going to happen with these sparks?
With the Klippa sparks?
Yeah. Right now, if we elevate them all, there'll still be some left for Hashem to get rid of.
Yes. You see, we're just moments away from Mashiach, and look how much Klippa there still is in the world. Yeah.
So they can cut it, but after 30 days, they have to cut it. What's the big plan?
I was going to explain what happens later, but the fact that they can cut it, so then what happens at the end after the Metsora is locked up for a week or two? Then all these signs of impurity disappear, right? Once it disappears, means that Hashem now removed them from the person. If Hashem does it, that's the way it's supposed to be. Right. We'll see later why we do cut it.
So when a person speaks Lashon Hara or does some kind of Avera, then they get to us and they have to be the conduit for Klippa to enter the world.
Right.
And they can't prevent that or block it off.
They can't block it off.
But also that's an opposite, just like a man's beard that's not touched is channeling the
that's the opposite.
Energy
yeah. This you're not allowed to cut off because Klippa has to get it. That you're not allowed to cut off because it's too much Kedusha.
So it's people are really just a little cell phone towers to channel out. It's cool how a person's body, just your a man's beard can affect so much.
Right, everything, actually every movement, everything we do, everything we say is channeling all sorts of spiritual energy. Yeah. If you have a device that's connected to a satellite, everything you do is affecting the satellite up there. And from there, it comes back down here. But I'm here, that's thousands of miles away or more. And I press this, obviously it does something up there. And then from there, it comes down here. That's exactly what happens with us, with everything we do. But it's not a satellite, it's spheres.
Where are the cell phones?
The Zohar explains the idea of the goat that sent away Azazel on Yom Kippur, that it's also connected to this idea that there's a certain amount of eyes that Klippa has to get. Arufa, The same is with the calf that has to atone for a murder that we never figured who the murderer was. So we also deal with that calf in a very unusual way. And apparently it's also the same idea. It's giving chayis to klipa. So how do you get rid of the klipa? The proper way to discontinue the sustenance to klipa is through tshuva, not through force, but through tshuva. And when we do tshuva, what happens? Yimshech b'chinas meichen da'aba. Then this light of Hashem that left the body comes back and shines on the person. And when that light shines, then according to Torah, they can no longer get any chayas. And that's a way that won't provoke them to come back with more if they feel that they deserve it and it's coming to them, and I'm not letting them get it, they're going to come to attack me. But once it's al pi Torah, then they know this is what they can get, and now they can't get any more chayes from this person because the light of Chochmah is shining. There's a very interesting thing about Metsora. You know, Metsora is not just any kind of blotches on the skin. It has to be a certain color, certain details. And there's more than that. The kohen has to come, look at it, and he has to say it's tummy. As long as he doesn't say the word that's tummy, the person is not tummy. In other words, what's the difference? If he says it, he's only sort of letting us know the truth, but it's really tummy because it has all the conditions that create impurity. No. For example, it says when it comes to a house, there's also the same thing of Metsora, not Metsora, but it's Negoyim. There are also, a house could be plain. On the walls, you see blotches of discoloring. And that makes the house impure. And the Kohen comes to the house and looks at it, and he says, it's impure. So the Gemara says, if you suspect that it might be impure, take everything out of the house. Because once he says the house is impure, everything in the house becomes impure. But what does it help that I took it out of the house? And these discolorings mean impure. So even before the Kohen comes, it's already impure. The answer is no. It doesn't become impure until he says the words. He looks at it and he says it's impure. So this is the answer, that saying it impure, or the same thing, saying that it is pure, has to do with the Kohen. The Kohen himself contains a certain light of Kedusha, and when he comes and he looks at it and he pronounces something, that has a spiritual effect on the house, on the person, on the skin, and so on. So at the end, the Kohen comes and he has to pronounce that this person now is pure. That's why he said that it has to be through the Kohen. He comes to purify the Metsora. Because Hashem, now that this person did Shuvah, and now the Chitzenim can no longer get any sustenance from him, then there's a mitzvah to cut over the hair. Now you can cut the hair off because you're not taking anything away from him. Why do you have to cut the hair for? If the person became pure already. So he said, even though the person became pure already, but being that this is the excess of his intellectual energy, so the klipas could now in the future get chayes from it. Came dinim kosher because this is something that is intense gevura. The sibus katnas eradayim because there's very little light. Shem ba'adayim b'chinas kedusha el yoyna. Shemahem nimshach levushim kedoshim menal the cyrus. Hashenkin kishach hakach meir b'kedusha el yoyna dabas ksiv lo yisakiv b'pasreishchem kimehem nimshach levushim kedoshim kanal. Basically, what he's saying is that whatever is, I guess, maybe residue that's left from it, the klipa can get high, so you have to cut over the hair. But this is the idea of hair, that it's excess symptom, and therefore depends who the person is and what the circumstances are. Because if it's from a higher level, then it's a positive thing. It's from a lower level, then it's a negative thing. And what is it all about? We want to give chayis to kedusha, and we don't want to give sustenance to klipa. And here is a way that klipa can get chayis. This is the end of the first ois. At the bottom of the page it says Beis. Before we go there, tomorrow, Mitzvah Shem, we'll take the workbooks and we'll do a review of the terms that are found in this first ice, some of the questions. Okay, to be continued, Mitzvah Shem. I think so. So far, I think so.